Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So today's episode of the Recovery Toolkit podcast, we have Stacey Goodwin on our show. Stacey, tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you do at the moment.
Yeah, so I am 4 years into recovery from gambling addiction and working for Epic Restart Foundation as a mentor and women's lead, so trying to get more women involved.
So what does that involve? What women lead? I know that's something that you're passionate about. Tell us a little bit about your role.
Do you know what it is? Like, women's needs, I have realised, especially since coming into this space and this role, are so different. We need such different things and we need to have a women's perspective on stuff. And so for me, it's about just injecting some of that into what we already do, as well as creating something women specific, because although we want to get to a place where everybody feels comfortable with everybody, and that's so important, there is a need to have a safe space for women to be able to talk about things that maybe women don't feel comfortable in speaking about in front of men.
Yeah. And I know how passionate you are about it, and I know how much this means to you. Yeah. So let's go all the way back to why this means so much to you. You know, so you mentioned your 4 years in recovery. Mm-hmm. Tell us about day one in recovery, and tell us a little bit about your story of recovery. You know, tell us where you got support from initially. That might be a good place to start.
Yeah, do you know what? I'd spent so long feeling alone that I genuinely believed with all of my heart I was the only woman to ever in the world have a gambling addiction. Like, it had never happened to another woman. And so I looked for a women's only, and I managed to find it with Gordon Moody. So I think, and this remains one of the most powerful moments of my life. I stepped into this house where they were doing the treatment, basically. So I went into retreat and counselling, and there was this room full of women. And we all knew why we were there. We were there because we'd all got a gambling addiction. That's the thing that had brought us all together, but nobody spoke about it. It was like the elephant in the room still. And the counsellors walked in, and then people started talking. And I remember just sat watching these two women on the opposite side of the room having a conversation about gambling. And I just got so emotional because I'd never seen other women talking about it. I had such a problem in saying gambling out loud. So to see that it was normalised in that moment and there were other women, that for me was day one of knowing that I wasn't on my own, which I think was a huge part and a kickstart to my recovery.
And how long did that go on for? How long was that sort of recovery treatment process with Gordon Moody?
The actual treatment was I think we spent 4 nights there initially, which doesn't sound a lot, and I had my own skepticism about it. I was like, nah, like 8 years in addiction I was, 4 nights ain't going to change anything. But it was so intense, and then we had, I think it was 12 weeks counselling outside, and then we went back in for another 3 nights. And to anybody who listens who thinks like me that's not going to do anything, it did. It really, really did. And it just helped me get ready for the outside world a little bit.
So when you finished that period, what was it that your recovery looked like after that? So I know you started being the woman that you didn't have. And I know that's how you like try and you know, you want to be that person that wasn't there for you, so to speak. Tell us about this journey that you went on after that, because this is just quite remarkable, I think.
Yeah, I think very initially afterwards, I wanted to live. It wasn't about sharing my story. It was about getting through the day. It was about trying to get out of the bath. So honestly, when I left treatment, I spent a long time using the tools that I'd learned, which were in the bath, but it was excessive. And I tell everybody, I look back now, and what happened when I left treatment was I lived the life of a gambler without gambling. I didn't have a slot machine, but honestly, I was still isolated. I still had so much debt that I didn't know what to do with. I still didn't know how to talk to people or create relationships or start to build that trust back that I'd broken a lot of people. So yes, I was feeling better in that I can go without gambling, and that's amazing. But actually, that's all I was really doing, was getting through my day saying, yes, I haven't had a bet, but not really living. And I remember it was a very pivotal moment again in my life, and I asked myself, what did I go through this for? It was when COVID was coming around, and I said to myself, there must be a reason that I've been through this. And I think I was looking for something more than going in the bath and avoiding an urge at that point. And so I decided to share my story. Again, throughout my entire 8 years, I never spoke to another woman. I never saw another woman who had a gambling addiction. And that is what I needed. I needed so much to see that I wasn't on my own. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to be that person, and I'm going to do it. I opened my laptop and I started writing my story, and that's where the book came from.
Tell us about the book. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was something, like I said, I had this thought, and I thought if I could share with other people, and it was also a coping tool, was to write, because it was COVID. I was incredibly scared that I couldn't escape and go for a walk now. I couldn't go and see my mum. I was trapped with potentially all these thoughts and urges, and so I turned that into writing, and it helped me cope. And as I was writing it, I thought, I could have done with this. I could have done with reading how it felt. I remember sharing the manuscript with my mum, and she was like, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that this is what you felt or this is what you were going through. And so to me, it was a point where I thought, I'm going to share this for the world. And so, yeah, I approached so many publishers and got so many rejections, but I was so passionate about it. I thought, do you know what, this means something, and I'm going to do it myself. And so I published it myself with all the spelling mistakes that are in there. And it's helped so many people, so many people. I'm so glad that I did it. And again, quite honestly, it was a coping tool for me.
It was, it has helped so many people. What did that lead on to?
I think the success of that, kind of during that as well, I started an anonymous Facebook page was what I did. And I started sharing on there and telling people, don't be afraid. And then I sat down and I thought, what a hypocrite. I sat doing this without a face and telling people not to be ashamed. And so I put my face to my page, and it just blew up. And I'm so grateful that it did. And at the time, again, I recognise now it was a coping tool. I ploughed myself into that work and showing other people. And honestly, all of the work that I did through that point, I think, was a distraction, was a purpose, was something for me to get up and do. And I'm so grateful that I did. And the feedback that I get from it is incredible. But when I look back now, I'm able to see that it was supporting me through yet another struggle.
Yeah, there's a few things you said in that, like you sat down and you said, there must be a reason I've went through this. And you could have looked and looked and you could never have found it, but you've actually turned that into a little bit of a mission, haven't you? You've turned that into a purpose, and, something that I firmly believe in. I couldn't sit here now doing this and do the job that I do had I not been through all of the chaos. And it's the chaos that's created Richie that I am now.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that chaos. And a lot of people go, you're grateful for being an addict and addiction and all of the stuff you lost and relationships and family and, all of that sort of stuff. And you're grateful for it. And I really am, because I got through it.
Yeah.
I got through it in the end, and I'm sat here now. And I think that's important, that you reframe everything in your life so that it works for you.
Yeah.
It works for you. And having now reflected, you've just said, now I'm looking back, that was probably a bit of a coping strategy that I had there. You've just got to find something that works for you at any given time, though, haven't you?
Yeah.
And actually, if that was what was working for you at that time, great. Could it have been different, do you think?
I don't regret any of it. I think that if I knew now, back then, knew what I knew now back then, I probably would have taken a bit of a step back, because actually realizing what I did was my entire purpose for 8 years was chasing a jackpot. That's what I lived for. And when I achieved that, I think that was the most dangerous time of my life, because I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know the reason. And so that became a reason for me. This was my purpose. This was the reason that I was alive, was to tell people my story and to help them wherever I could. Now I know me and I know what I enjoy doing, and it's not filled 100% with messages and content creation and putting things out. It's things that I genuinely enjoy. Like you said, yes, it could have been different. I'm grateful for it helping me through a very difficult time. And it helped me get to a point to where I do know me now, and I'm able to take a step back and feel less guilty, because that was a huge thing that came with sharing, was the guilt of the amount of messages and not being able to respond to them all. And yeah, I think that I found true purpose for life now, and that was a part of my journey to getting there.
I imagine being so vulnerable, it's quite early in your recovery still, being so vulnerable exposed you to quite a lot.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Very naively. I think that it wasn't just people recognised, as well as me, a gap in young women coming forward and saying that I have a problem with gambling. And again, whilst I'm grateful for everything that I've done and everybody that it's helped, looking back now, I don't think that maybe I was ready, or maybe I understood enough about potentially the impact, about what was happening. And I don't think that other people recognised that either. So without any bad intention, my life went from being very, very isolated because of gambling to everybody wanting me, but it was still because of gambling.
Yeah.
And I reached a point after that where I thought, I want to be me. I have a life outside of gambling whatsoever, whether it's talking about gambling, whether it's talking about not gambling. There's a life outside of that too. And that came after I'd kind of hit burnout, honestly. That's what happened. I did so much so quickly that I became very tired, that I became withdrawn, that I went back to maybe some of the things that I'd recognised I'd done within gambling. And that was through that.
Yeah, I think what we tend to do in recovery, or a lot of people tend to do in recovery, is people please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and struggle to say no.
Yeah.
And I think, from knowing you quite well now, that was something that you really struggled with, and a lot of people asked you to do a lot of stuff that potentially you didn't mind doing at the time, but actually you didn't know how to say no to either.
Yeah.
There's very few boundaries in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that people who are early in recovery have that conversation with themselves around, what boundaries do I need in place to help and protect myself? Yeah. And I think that's something that we've spoke about a lot, isn't it? About how do you transition from being in the public eye so much to getting your life back?
Yeah.
Finding Stacey. What was the pivotal moment for you to find Stacey again?
I think I really enjoyed. I got my own flat, which was huge for me in terms of rebuilding my credit and getting to a point where I could rent something in my own name. And I got my dog. And all of a sudden, the things that I enjoyed were going out with my dog and walking and looking after what I got. And I was going and seeing friends that I'd made outside of the recovery space. So I didn't go to talk about gambling. We didn't speak about gambling whatsoever. And I enjoyed it so much. It was about my life and what I was doing and what they were doing and about their kids. And that was huge for me in understanding that there are things that I enjoy. There are people who want to speak to me for me and just about what's happening in my life outside of work or content creation or whatever it might be. And that's when I kind of said to myself, I enjoy this stuff too. I need a balance of this. And you're absolutely right in terms of the boundaries. And something else I think that is hugely important is To recover means to rest and take back. I missed out the rest. I went very quickly from going through treatment to jumping in, sharing, helping other people. There was a period, but like I say, I wasn't really working on myself. I was just stagnant, and I wasn't doing things, private victories, that's something that we talk about. I didn't have any of them. I was immediately putting them online and not being able to absorb that. So I think, again, for anybody in early recovery, rest is a very important part of recovering. And that for me comes before the work to take back. And that's what I'd do differently if I went into day one of recovery again.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful that you tell your story. I think it's so powerful. Lived experience is at the forefront of supporting people. But that comes at a price sometimes. So that comes at a price to the person and their recovery if it's done too soon. And what I always try and encourage people to do is to work through any of the stuff that they're going to share or talk about at a much greater depth than the level that they actually talk about.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's an important message. And like you said there, what we try and do at the foundation is help people go from being quite dependent, you know, dependent on services, dependent on support, and becoming independent. And that's the private victory. That's them working on their self.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that and you're at a stage in your recovery where you feel strong and you've worked through the underlying issues to why you gambled in the first place, then start sharing, then start giving back, then start helping other people. And that's where you become interdependent, and that's where you give back. And that becomes a big part of people's recovery. It's a massive part of both of our recoveries is giving back. And I think it's really important that people don't jump in too soon, you know, and it can be, like you said, a bit of an avoidance as well, because whilst doing all of that stuff and presenting as Stacey, I've got my shit together, Stacey on the inside was still not fully understanding herself.
Yeah. I recognise it 100% now. And like, there isn't a part of it that I regret. I still want to go on and share, and I still want to make women feel comfortable, or anybody feel a bit more comfortable and less alone. But I am able to support people in a much better way now than previously. I would be just messaging all day long, and not actually living any kind of life for myself. And one thing that I learned from you actually is lead by example. I don't want somebody to sit for 90% of the day either going back to that place where they were gambling or thinking about it, or I want them to go and live their life. And if there's a part of that, absolutely keep it alive in terms of your recovery and keep yourself grounded, but live a life outside of that as well, because very honestly, that's something that I didn't do. When people saw me on TikTok or Facebook, that's all I was doing. That was my reason for living. My reasons for living now. I am so happy, and I can't even, it's unbelievable to me how happy I am. Sometimes I have to pinch myself and be like, all this is mine. But that wouldn't happen if I didn't put my phone down and spend time with my family. That wouldn't happen if every evening I was doing 100 messages to different people, or it happened because I let the gambling go a little bit and I lived as Stacey, and that's how I've become the happiest, truly happiest I've ever been in my life.
I love that. I love it. If I was to ask you, what are the 3 to 5 things that are in your recovery toolkit now that you use to maintain your recovery, what would you say they are now?
My 3 main things. And the first thing I want to say about this is that they're simple things, and you have to open yourself up to see the benefit of what these simple things can do. I was so naive. I was like, walking, no, I'm not doing that. That's not going to help me. That is no magic pill, is what I want to get across. So for me, a bath is incredibly helpful, because the truth is a bath will change my environment. It will change my temperature. So there's so many sensory things that change. It changes the smell. It changes what I'm feeling in terms of physically on my skin, and also much calmer. You can change the lighting. So much changes in that small action that can completely change your mindset. So for me, a bath is absolutely huge. Walking, going out with my dog is again, changing environment is a big one for me. If I can physically move myself, then my mind tends to move with it. So having a walk. And then the other one most definitely is talking. That's something that I never did. And that doesn't always even mean talking to somebody else. Sometimes if I can talk to myself in a very realistic and grounded way, and I recognize when I can't do that as well now, and that's when I will talk to somebody else about it. But they're the three things that I notice about myself that I can pull out at any point and say this supports me. There are others, is what I would say, but they're generally the talking, the walking is something I can pull out anywhere. The bath is something I can do on my own at home, and it's important to relate your toolkit to where you are, when you can pull them out, what's realistic. But they're huge for me.
When do they? So they're the things that really help you in your toolkit. But you also said in your early recovery, you just were in the bath all the time.
Yeah, it's about moderation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that comes with anything. People might have escaping a video game, which is absolutely fine. There is no problem with that. But if you are in that video game for 6-7 hours a day, okay, that's no longer healthy. I had an unhealthy relationship with the bath because what I was doing was actually locking myself away. It was almost like I didn't enjoy it at that point. What I was doing was locking the door with my phone in another room and isolating myself. What I use the bath for now is genuinely no more than an hour, and it's not very often I'll reach an hour, to be honest, but using it in a healthy way for those healthy changes that it does to my body and my mind.
And I think that's really important for people to hear is a healthy coping strategy can become unhealthy if it's not managed correctly. And there's so many things. Exercise, I used to be a PT, so I used to see lots of people have an unhealthy relationship with exercise. But actually everybody used to say, oh, aren't they great? They go to the gym, they're dead fit. But they had an unhealthy relationship with it, One of my friends, he's in recovery. He's a workaholic. He turns over multiple 7 figures and he's deemed successful. His family life struggles and is affected by it. His recovery is affected by it. His health's affected by it. There's so many other things that are affected by it, but nobody sees him as having problem because he's a workaholic and he's successful. So everything in our lives, can become unhealthy.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a perfect example of what we were talking about. The social media stuff and helping other people was an amazing coping strategy for me, but it was also unhealthy. I was not speaking to my partner at the time. I would sit and ignore her because I was giving my attention to other people and trying to help him. And I can do that in such a healthier way now that it still remains something I'm passionate about and I never want to stop doing. But doing that in a healthy way, like you said, it's balance. It's all balance, and look after what you love is one of my absolute values that I try and live by, and that comes down to my car, my dog, and it's about balancing things for me with things for them and how that works. So
you mentioned values there. It's something that we talk a lot about. What are your other values? What else do you value?
I have 4 things that I try and live by day. The first is honesty, and that comes down now. I noticed this the other day. I was like eating a chocolate bar, and I had a question about whether I tell anyone that I've ate it or not, or whether I lie about it. And I was like, I live by that value so much that actually I can recognize at any point. So honesty is a massive one for me. Look after what you love, and that for me is everything. Like I said, my car, I love my car, so I make sure I've got the money for an MOT because it gives me my dependence, my independence rather. It means that I can go out and do whatever I want. So I clean it, I look after it, I make sure I've got the money for the MOT and the service. My dog, I make sure I've got the money for her vet bills, because I love what she brings me and my family. Help those that don't know is something that I live by incredibly strongly. I feel that I didn't know about a lot that goes on in this space, a lot of the politics, a lot of stuff that I just don't want to get involved in. I spent a long time being angry at gambling and all the other things that come with it. I had no idea about any of that when I walked into that rehab that day and asked for help. And the people that come to me also do not know any of that, and they still need help. So it helps me to stay grounded and away from getting myself too involved with that stuff, really. And the final one is protect your peace. Something that I love more than anything is coming out of that chaos as much as I can. I've learned to live a life outside of it, and I love that now. Yes, I like a bit of excitement. Yes, I like to go and have adventure and stuff, but if something isn't bringing me a benefit and is disrupting my peace from going to sleep at night and actually getting to sleep, and I don't get involved. So they're the 4 things that I practice every single day.
I love them all, but the last one, protect your peace, I think is so important. How do you do that?
Again, it's asking myself, so sometimes I will get very angry at certain situations, and it's about asking myself, what am I going to benefit from this? Is there a reason outside of my anger that I'm feeling in this moment that I'm going to benefit if I take action? So, and that comes down to anything. There could be a lot of comments that I don't like to see, or that really get my back up and I want to retaliate. And I think, what is the outcome of me doing that? Is an argument on social media. Do I need that? No, I really don't. And so, do you know what? Turn your comments off. Don't look at it anymore. Or it could be family stuff. It could be not. What am I going to gain from getting involved in this? And it goes for everywhere. What I want to do at the end of every single day is hug my partner and sit and watch TV, have the kids in bed happy, and that's it. And is this going to potentially upset that? And if it does, I won't do it.
Yeah, I love that. I know we spoke about the things that you have in your toolkit now. What are 3 to 5 things that you would potentially suggest people have in their early recovery? You know, so I know you get a lot of people reaching out to you on social media and asking for support. What are like 3 things that you tell them to do in early recovery that can benefit them?
Early recovery, first of all, is very different to what I would use now. So like I said, I use a bath now. If you're going and locking yourself in the bathroom for 7 hours a day to get away, it's not the same. And what I needed very early on was very different to what I need now. Very early on, honestly, blockers. And I would still recommend that I will have them on forever, but it's an important thing. So your GAM bands, your GAM stops, your banking blocks, whatever it might be.
And what do they do? So if people listening might, you know, be thinking, I might have a problem with gambling, but what is a blocker? What does it do?
So the software for such as GamBam will physically stop you getting onto the sites. GamStop you can sign up to, and then that will stop you from registering with any online casino registered or licensed within the UK. There's Sense, which can buy you from land-based casinos. There's Moses that will buy you from bookies in your local area. It's about having as many of those as you possibly can, because the very honest truth is, I mean, you aren't going to sit here and tell everyone recovery is easy, because if anybody's doing a podcast saying that, then it's lies, because it's very hard. So for me, early recovery is about getting support through those urges, because they're going to happen. They are going to happen. And if you have as much support as you can to get through that, then do it. Because I will openly say I have tried 1,000,000 times just to test if my blockers are working. Are they still working? And yes, they are, but that's what helps me get through. And people say to me all the time, you are so strong. And I go back and I say, actually, I'm not. What was strong about me was accepting that I needed other things, because sometimes I don't feel strong enough. And so putting those things in are there for when I don't feel strong enough to go on willpower alone, because honestly, there's been many, many times where I haven't, and I've come very close. So that's what's strong, is having them in place.
I just on that, I think there's one of my favourite sayings and quotes that I use a lot is, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose, or something like that. And in that choice lies our freedom. And I love that, because it sums up what was going on in my head. But actually, we've shortened this down, haven't we? And we call this mind the gap.
Yeah.
And it's about just minding the gap from actually having a thought and doing something.
Yeah.
And what these blockers are potentially doing is creating space, isn't it? It's creating time. So you try and get through a blocker and it doesn't work, or actually it makes you think about something else, or it makes you, divert your attention in a different place. And that's all you're trying to do, isn't it? You're trying to get time. You're trying to create time for yourself so that actually you choose a different action. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Anything as well. When I talk about protect my peace, what that is really is mind the gap. So if I'm feeling very angry, if I put a bit of space in there, and I'm sure anybody can relate to this, if they've done something out of anger, if only they had taken a bit of time to think about it, maybe they would have gone down a different route. So absolutely. And like I say, that's a huge thing in terms of protecting my peace. And I still have them in place now, but have it in, because don't think the urges won't come. That's not realistic. They will come. Sometimes they'll be very strong and sometimes they'll feel a little bit easier, but support yourself. Have them in place for when you go into that different mindset, which is very different to your rational one.
And I think that it's important to normalise that, I know you're 4 years in recovery now. I'm over 5, coming up 6 years. You still have thoughts, don't you? You still have thoughts, and they're not always like, oh, I'm going to go and gamble. For me, sometimes it's like, I just love to get a bag of cocaine. I still have that thought, like certain things, certain triggers happen where you just go out and just get pissed. It's okay to have the thought. The thoughts will come and go. Yeah. It's about allowing that thought to leave again. Yeah. And I think that's where meditation massively helped me, was actually, meditation's not about having an empty mind. It's about acknowledging the thought that enters your head and being able to let it go again. Yeah. And having that sort of process when I was well allowed us to be able to do it better when I did have a thought or I was in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell everyone, don't feel guilty for sitting thinking, I could smash an hour on slots, because that's what I often think to myself, but it's what I do after. And I think the next thing I would say in terms of the free for early recovery kind of links into that. So the second one that was something that really helped me was when I recognised I was having a thought about gambling, I would stand on the spot for at least 60 seconds and do nothing. And that was a very physical way of me putting just that little bit of gap in to give my brain even the littlest chance of turning that thought around. And that was hugely helpful. To stand and look at a clock for 60 seconds, it sounds nothing, but it's a lot of time in that moment. And it's time for, how quickly these thoughts come. And so give it time to go again. And then the third one that I do with most of the people that we work with in the foundation now, is I get them to write down what happens to them physically, emotionally, spiritually. What happens to you when you recognise that your mood is dropping? Maybe you suffer with some kind of mental health issue, or what happens to you then? It could be that you become very lethargic. It could be a number of things. There will be physical things as well, but we don't always notice them. And then I get them to write a list of what they can do, what brings them out of that place, and then I tell them to give it someone. So it's about that support. My mum has a list that I become, honestly, a bit of a bitch when I'm just not feeling myself, or I'm in a very low place, or I'll ignore the calls or whatever. And she then can say to me, Stacey, these things are happening to you. I'm noticing them. Can I support you? What do you need? And then I can pull the list out and say, actually, do you know what? I really love drawing. I ain't drawn anything for ages. Let me pull that out and I suppose it's all about building your toolkit from very early.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? They're tools that you potentially had early, but you've still got now as well, haven't you?
Yeah, of course.
And I think it's about having that open and honest conversation with people, just so that they know how to support you as well. I think there must have been a conversation with your mother about, Mum, I've been told to try and create this list of things that potentially show that, my behaviour's changing. Yeah. And then I've got a list of things that can help us when my behaviour changes. All I need you to do is to raise my awareness of it.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, because I don't always notice that I'm being a bit more snappy than usual. Sometimes it completely goes over my head. Can I tell you? No, I'm not giving you my list. But yes, it's things that other people can notice too. And also, it helped our relationship so much because my mum didn't then have to sit and ask questions. Why is she ignoring me? What have I done? Is there... Actually, she knew straight away, okay, this is a symptom of Stacey not feeling very good, maybe struggling a little bit. And it brought her in on that journey with me and stopped so many what ifs that it helped us build a better relationship too.
Yeah, I think trust is huge, isn't it? It's something that gets broken through addiction, and to build that trust back up, there's lots of different things that we can potentially do, but we've got to do what we say we're going to do. We've also got to show a bit of vulnerability, and we've got to remove the other person's ability to assume. Because I think assumption is something that kills relationships, if I'm honest, you know. So everybody assuming that, I assumed that you were unwell, or you were happy, or you were sad, or I assumed that. Well, why didn't you ask us? Or, you know what I mean? To
assume makes an ass of you and me.
It's
That's
exactly
what it
that,
is.
isn't it? It's exactly what it is. And you know, what better way than to sit down with somebody and say, if this happens, this is how you can support us.
Yeah.
You know, and they're great conversations for people to have, aren't they? You know.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think it's a turning point as well. So I try and be the opposite of what I was in so many areas of my life, and that means making the opposite decisions when I would choose to hide and I would choose to tell. So that physically opposite. And what I'd done throughout my addiction and when I was breaking trust with people was hide, was not talk, was lie. So what I do now, and that broke the relationship, and so to make that better, what I do is tell. What I do is tell the truth, as hard as it is to say. I'm very open in that I had a relapse, and I imagined myself at a crossroad when it happened, and I thought what I would used to do and what broke trust was lie and hide this. I'm going to do the exact opposite. And I sent emails, I rang my mom, I did it. And don't get me wrong, like she was upset, but she was also so much more understanding and happy that I told the truth. And then she could trust me going forward to say that I am going to tell you, as hard as it is for me and you to hear. It didn't happen again, which is amazing. But now she knows what I tell her is the truth. And that's taken time to build, but we know that relationships get so broken in this. Bring that person in on that journey with you is also the other thing I would say, because you have shut them out for so long, probably through shame, probably through stigma, probably through being upset about what you've done. Put yourself in their shoes. If they came to you and said, I am really struggling and I want your support, there's very few people that get turned around and say, nah, not a chance. They want to be in, they want to support you, and it helps them to help you. I had a chat with a lady many years ago, and she said this to me, and it always stuck. She said that when her sister found out that she was gambling, her sister said, I am mad at you for not giving me the opportunity to help you. And that really, really stuck with me, in that actually that's something I've stopped the people I love from doing, because I thought I was protecting them, but what they wanted to do was just come in and help.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing for somebody to see, isn't it? And if you've got someone you love, then that's generally all you want. You want to see them smile, and you want to see them happy, and you want to offer them the support. But if you're not being open with the person who loves you, then they're not able to do that, you know. So yeah, I think it's quite a nice way to bring this to an end, Stacey, if I'm honest. So just want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing so openly and vulnerably. And yeah, if people want to connect with you, then they can do through your social channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously we'll make people aware of how to do that in the show notes and stuff. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to sit here with you, but also to call you a colleague and a friend. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.